I never thought I'd be the guy writing a post like this. You read these stories and think, this would never happen to me. But then life has this way of flipping your world upside down when you least expect it. So, here I am, 34, married to Amanda for 6 years, and trying to figure out how everything fell apart. Amanda and I met in college. She had this spark about her, this magnetic energy that made people gravitate toward her. She could light up a room just by walking in, and honestly, I felt lucky she chose me. We were one of those couples everyone thought would make it. We had inside jokes, finished each other's sentences, classic soulmates, right? Or so I believed. The first 6 years of our marriage weren't perfect, but they were ours. Sure, there were disagreements. I worked long hours as an architect, and Amanda, who's a marketing manager, sometimes felt I wasn't present enough. I tried to make up for it with weekend getaways, flowers, and thoughtful gestures. We weren't perfect, but who is? At the end of the day, I trusted her, and I thought she trusted me. That trust was my anchor, something I never questioned. Until about a month ago. It started small. Amanda began acting differently. At first, it was subtle. She'd put her phone face down on the counter, something she'd never done before, or disappear into another room to take a call. She'd stay out late claiming it was work drinks, or girls' nights, even though she'd never been much of a social butterfly. Amanda's warmth, the thing I'd fallen in love with, felt like it was slowly slipping away. It wasn't anything I could prove or even articulate, it was just a feeling. But it lingered. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. She'd recently started a new position at work, one she'd been aiming for years. It was more responsibility, more stress, and I figured she just needed some time to adjust. But then the excuses started piling up. Oh, I'm working late again. Rachel and I are grabbing drinks, don't wait up. The thing is, Rachel isn't exactly an enigma. She's one of those people who posts every moment of her life on Instagram, from her morning coffee to her dog's latest antics. And for someone supposedly out with Amanda, Rachel's stories didn't exactly align with what Amanda was saying. One night, I casually scrolled through Rachel's Instagram while Amanda was out. There were no pictures, no stories, nothing to indicate Amanda was with her. It didn't hit me like a thunderbolt. It was more like a slow, creeping realization that something was off. That realization turned into suspicion, and suspicion turned into paranoia. I hated it. I hated that I was even entertaining the thought that Amanda might be lying to me. But once the idea took root, I couldn't shake it. The first real crack in the foundation came on a Friday night. Amanda came home around midnight, looking flustered. Her hair was too neat, her makeup too perfect for someone who'd been out for casual drinks with Rachel. I casually asked how Rachel was doing, and Amanda stammered, Fine. Same as always." It was such a simple answer, but it didn't feel right. Her tone sounded rehearsed, like she'd memorized the line but forgotten the context. That night, a tiny whisper of doubt crept into my mind. I tried to tell myself I was imagining things, that I was reading too much into nothing. But the doubt wouldn't go away. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, going over every little thing that had seemed off in the past month. The late nights. The secretive phone calls. The way she seemed distracted, even when we were together. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. I didn't want to be that guy, the insecure, paranoid husband who thinks every little thing is a sign of betrayal. I told myself Amanda was stressed, that she needed my support, not my suspicion. So I let it go. Or at least I tried to. But the universe wasn't about to let me move on so easily. A few days later, Amanda left her phone on the kitchen counter while she was in the shower. It buzzed with a message, and out of habit, I glanced at the screen. The name on the notification wasn't Rachel. It wasn't even someone I recognized. It just said, Jason, with a little winking emoji next to it. My stomach dropped. Jason? Who the hell was Jason? I told myself not to jump to conclusions. It could have been a coworker, a client, anyone. But the whisper of doubt that had been quietly gnawing at me was now screaming. I didn't open the message, maybe because I was scared of what I'd find. Instead, I walked out of the kitchen and pretended I hadn't seen anything. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything. My mind kept going back to that message. I tried to convince myself it was innocent, that there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. But deep down I knew something was wrong. That night, Amanda was unusually cheerful, almost like she was overcompensating. She kept asking about my day, laughing at my terrible jokes, and cuddling up to me on the couch. It felt forced, like she was trying too hard to convince me everything was normal. And maybe it worked, because for a brief moment, I let myself believe it. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was imagining things. But then her phone buzzed again. This time, she grabbed it quickly, her eyes darting toward me as she turned the screen away. She mumbled something about a work email, and excused herself to the bedroom. I sat there, staring at the empty spot on the couch where she'd just been, and felt my heart sink. Something was definitely wrong. And I was going to find out what. After that Friday night, the whisper of doubt in my mind grew louder by the day. I found myself analyzing every little thing Amanda did, every word she said, looking for some clue that would either confirm or disprove what I was starting to suspect. I hated myself for it. This wasn't the kind of husband I wanted to be, snooping, second-guessing, doubting the person I trusted with my life. But I couldn't stop. Amanda's behavior didn't help. The next week, she started taking more work calls, in private, shutting herself in our bedroom or pacing in the backyard while talking in a hushed tone. When I asked her what was going on, she waved it off, saying, "It's just a crazy time at work. You know how it is." But the way she avoided my eyes when she said it made my stomach churn. By Wednesday, I'd had enough. I decided I needed more than gut feelings and suspicious behavior. I needed proof, something solid to either put my doubts to rest or confirm my worst fears. That night, while Amanda was in the shower, I gave in to the urge I'd been fighting for days. I picked up her phone. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe I thought I'd find nothing and feel like an idiot for doubting her. Maybe I thought I'd see a few innocent messages that would ease my mind. What I found instead made my blood run cold. Her phone was locked, of course, but I knew her passcode. It was my birthday. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the screen, before taking a deep breath and unlocking it. Her text messages were the first thing I opened. I scrolled past messages from her coworkers, Rachel, and her mom, my hands shaking as I looked for anything out of the ordinary. And then I saw it. Jason Redhart. My heart sank. I opened the thread, and what I saw made my stomach churn. The messages were flirty, playful, and full of inside jokes I didn't recognize. There were mentions of lunches, secret meetings, and phrases like, "I can't wait to see you again," and "Last night was amazing." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. This wasn't just harmless banter, this was an affair. I kept scrolling, my hands trembling as I pieced together the timeline of their relationship. It had started months ago, just before Amanda began her new job. At first, the messages were casual, but over time, they became more intimate. There were references to hotels, to shared moments I couldn't even begin to imagine. And the worst part? One of the messages read, "I still can't believe you think he cheated. You're so much better than him." What? My mind reeled. Amanda thought I'd cheated on her? That didn't make any sense. I'd never been unfaithful to her, not even close. I racked my brain, trying to figure out where she could have gotten that idea, but I came up empty. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I knew I needed to stay calm. If I exploded without thinking, she'd just deny everything or turn it around on me. I needed a plan. I put the phone back where I found it, and spent the rest of the night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling while Amanda slept peacefully beside me. The weight of what I'd just discovered pressed down on me like a boulder. My wife, the person I trusted most in the world, was cheating on me. And not just that, she was doing it because she thought I'd cheated on her first. The next morning, I couldn't even look at her. She kissed me on the cheek before heading off to work, saying, "Don't work too hard today." Like nothing was wrong. I forced a smile and nodded, but inside, I felt like I was going to explode. I spent the day at my office, going through the motions of work while my mind raced. I needed to figure out how to handle this. Should I confront her? Should I gather more evidence? Should I reach out to Jason and get his side of the story? By the time Amanda came home that evening, I still didn't have a plan. She walked through the door, all smiles, carrying takeout from our favorite Thai place. "I thought we could have a quiet night in," she said, setting the food on the table. "You've been working so hard lately, and I feel like we haven't had much time together." Her words felt like a slap in the face. We haven't had much time together? That was rich, coming from someone sneaking around behind my back. But I played along, forcing myself to act normal while we ate dinner. I laughed at her jokes, asked about her day, and pretended like everything was fine. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Later that night, after Amanda went to bed, I stayed up in the living room, staring at my laptop. I started looking up private investigators, thinking maybe they could help me gather the proof I needed. I hated the idea of dragging someone else into my marriage problems, but I didn't see another option. I needed answers. I also started piecing together the timeline of her affair. The messages in her phone only went back a few months, but I couldn't help wondering if it had been going on even longer. How much of our marriage had been a lie? Had Amanda been cheating on me for years without me noticing? The thought made me sick. At some point, I fell asleep on the couch, and when I woke up the next morning, Amanda was already gone. There was a note on the counter that said, "Have a great day. Love you, Red Heart." I stared at the note for a long time, the words twisting in my gut. Did she really love me? Or was that just part of the act? I decided that night that I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I called my best friend, Mike, and told him everything. Mike and I have known each other since high school, and he's the kind of guy who always knows what to say. When I finished explaining, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Ethan," he said finally, his voice steady, "you need to confront her. You can't keep living like this. But when you do, don't let her twist things around. Stick to the facts, and don't let her make you doubt yourself." I knew he was right. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. But I also knew Amanda, and I knew she wasn't going to make this easy. She'd always had a way of turning things around, of making herself the victim. If I was going to confront her, I needed to be ready for whatever she threw at me. The next day, I made my decision. It was time to end the charade. I was going to confront Amanda, and I wasn't going to back down. The next evening, I decided it was time to confront Amanda. I spent the day replaying scenarios in my head, imagining how she might respond. Would she deny it? Cry? Get angry? I didn't know, but I was prepared for a storm. I'd seen enough in her messages with Jason to know that she couldn't talk her way out of this, at least, not without an explanation I'd never forget. When Amanda came home, she was in a good mood. Too good. She waltzed in carrying a bag from her favorite boutique, humming to herself like she didn't have a care in the world. "I grabbed a new dress for Rachel's party next weekend," she said, pulling it out to show me. "What do you think?" It was a nice dress, sure, but all I could think about was whether she bought it for me or for him. I forced a smile, my throat tightening as I said, "Looks great." Inside, I was screaming. We sat down for dinner, and the tension was unbearable. Amanda chatted about her day like nothing was wrong, while I barely touched my plate. My heart was pounding, my mind racing through the words I'd been rehearsing all day. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Amanda," I said, cutting her off mid-sentence. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered. "Sure," she said slowly, setting down her fork. "What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I know about Jason." The air in the room shifted instantly. Amanda froze, her eyes wide, the color draining from her face. For a moment, It was like she didn't even know how to breathe. What are you talking about? She stammered, her voice shaky. I'm talking about the texts, I said, my voice cold. The lunches, the hotels, the I can't wait to see you again messages. I know, Amanda. So don't lie to me. She blinked rapidly, her hands gripping the edge of the table as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. Ethan, I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what you're making it out to be. I laughed bitterly. Oh, it's not? So Jason isn't your little secret I wasn't supposed to know about. And you didn't spend the night with him last week when you said you were with Rachel? Should I keep going? Amanda opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her face was a mix of shock and panic, like she was struggling to come up with an excuse but couldn't find one fast enough. Finally, she blurted out, It's not what you think. I swear, it's not like that. I slammed my hands on the table, the sound echoing through the room. Then what is it, Amanda? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot like you've been cheating on me for months. So why don't you explain what it is? She flinched at my outburst, her eyes filling with tears. Okay, she said softly, her voice trembling. Okay, yes, I've been seeing Jason. But it's not what you think. It wasn't about you. It was about me. I felt so alone, Ethan. You're always at work, always distracted, and She choked on her words, wiping at her tears. I thought you didn't care anymore. That's a load of crap. I snapped. You thought I didn't care? So you decided to run to Jason instead of, I don't know, talking to me? What kind of excuse is that? She shook her head, her tears falling faster. It wasn't like that. I thought you were cheating on me. The room fell silent. I stared at her, trying to process what she just said. You thought I was cheating? On what planet would you think that? Amanda looked down, avoiding my eyes. I saw you texting someone a few months ago. Late at night. And then you started working all those extra hours, and I thought there was someone else. I convinced myself that you didn't love me anymore, that you'd moved on, and She broke off, sobbing. For a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. You thought I was cheating? So instead of talking to me, you decided to sleep with your ex? How does that even make sense, Amanda? She buried her face in her hands, her words muffled. I know it doesn't make sense. I wasn't thinking straight. I was hurt and angry, and Jason, he was just there. My anger boiled over. You destroyed our marriage because of a guess? Because you thought I was cheating? Let me make one thing very clear. I've never cheated on you. Not once. I've been working my ass off to give us a better life, and this is how you repay me? Amanda looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I'm sorry, Ethan. I didn't mean to hurt you. I don't know what I was thinking. Her apology felt hollow, like an empty echo of the trust she'd shattered. I stood up, pacing the room as my mind raced. Part of me wanted to keep yelling, to throw every bit of my anger at her until she understood the depth of the pain she'd caused. But another part of me just felt defeated. Like I was carrying a weight too heavy to bear. Finally, I stopped and looked at her. I don't know if I can do this anymore, I said quietly. You've broken something, Amanda. And I don't know if it can be fixed. Her sobs grew louder, and she reached for me, but I stepped back. Please, she begged. Don't give up on us. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Counseling, therapy, anything. Just don't leave me. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just turned and walked out of the room, her cries echoing behind me. I needed space, time to think. Because in that moment, I didn't know if there was anything left to save. After the confrontation, I drove. I didn't have a destination in mind, just the need to get away from the house, from Amanda, from everything that had just happened. The air in the car felt suffocating, heavy with the weight of her words. I thought you were cheating. The excuse kept bouncing around in my head, hitting the walls of my mind like a wrecking ball. How could she just decide, without proof, that I was unfaithful? And then, instead of talking to me, she went straight into the arms of Jason. The thought of her with him, her ex, no less, made my stomach churn. The betrayal cut so deep, it felt like it was slicing through my very core. I ended up at a park, the same one we used to take walks through when we were dating. Back then, we'd hold hands and talk about everything, our dreams, our plans, the kind of life we wanted to build together. It was so long ago, yet it felt like just yesterday. Sitting on one of the benches, staring out at the empty playground, I couldn't stop wondering how it had all gone so wrong. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, half hoping it wasn't Amanda. It wasn't. It was Mike. He must have sensed something was up, because he rarely called unless it was urgent. I debated ignoring it but finally picked up. "Hey, man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ethan," Mike said, his tone cautious. "You okay? You've been acting off lately." I figured I'd check in. I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. Finally I said, "Amanda's been cheating on me. With Jason." The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Mike let out a low whistle. "Dude, I don't even know what to say. I mean Jason? Her ex? What the hell?" "Yeah," I said bitterly. "She thought I was cheating, so she decided to get even. Except I wasn't cheating, Mike. I never have. And now..." My voice broke. "Now I don't even know if I can stay with her." "Look," Mike said, his voice firm. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight. But don't let her manipulate you into thinking this is your fault. She made the choice to cheat. That's on her, not you." "I know," I muttered. "It's just, everything feels so messed up. I don't even know where to start." "Take it one step at a time," he said. "And remember, you don't owe her forgiveness. She's the one who broke the trust, not you." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring out at the darkening sky. Mike was right. I didn't owe Amanda anything. But that didn't make the decision any easier. Part of me wanted to throw her out of the house, file for divorce, and never look back. But another part of me, one that I hated, still cared about her. Still remembered the woman I'd fallen in love with. When I finally got home, the house was quiet. Amanda was sitting on the couch, her face pale and blotchy from crying. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "Ethan," she said softly, "I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but please. I need you to know how sorry I am." I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, looking at her, the woman who had shared my life, my home, my dreams, and who had now shattered all of it. Finally I said, "You don't get to fix this with an apology, Amanda. Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you even understand how badly you've hurt me?" Tears welled up in her eyes again. "I do," she whispered. "And I hate myself for it. I was so stupid, Ethan. I was hurt and insecure, and I let those feelings take over. I didn't think about what I was doing, what I was risking." "Clearly," I said, my voice icy. "Because now you've destroyed everything we had." "And for what? Revenge? Validation? Was it worth it?" She flinched, her hands gripping the edge of the couch. "No," she said, shaking her head. "It wasn't worth it. I know that now. But Ethan, I need you to believe me when I say I never stopped loving you. Even when I was at my worst, I still loved you." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the love we'd shared hadn't been a complete lie. But how could I? How could I trust anything she said after what she'd done? "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," I said finally, my voice breaking. "You've taken everything we built and torn it apart. And the worst part is, you didn't even have a real reason to do it. You threw it all away because of some paranoid fantasy." Amanda started to cry again, but I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. Not now. Instead, I walked upstairs to the guest room and shut the door, leaving her alone with her guilt. That night, as I lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, a million thoughts raced through my mind. Should I leave? Should I give her a chance to make things right? Could our marriage ever recover from something like this? I didn't have the answers. All I knew was that I felt like a stranger in my own life, lost in the wreckage of a trust that had been broken beyond repair. The morning after the confrontation, the house felt suffocating. I'd slept, if you could even call it that, in the guest room, staring at the ceiling most of the night. My mind wouldn't stop racing, looping through every word Amanda had said, every tear she'd cried. None of it made sense. How could someone you love, someone you've built a life with, betray you so deeply? The weight of it sat on my chest like a boulder, making it impossible to breathe. When I finally dragged myself out of bed and went downstairs, Amanda was already at the kitchen table. She was holding a mug of coffee with both hands, staring into it like the answers to all our problems might be swirling somewhere at the bottom. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale, and her usually perfect hair was pulled back into a loose, messy bun. She looked up as I entered, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to say something, but no words came out. I ignored her and went straight for the coffee maker. Every movement felt heavy, deliberate, like I was forcing myself through thick mud. I poured myself a cup, the silence between us stretching longer and longer. I didn't want to look at her. I didn't want to sit down. But eventually I forced myself to take the seat across from her. Avoiding her wouldn't solve anything. For a while, we just sat there, not speaking. The tension in the room was unbearable. Amanda kept glancing at me like she was waiting for me to say something, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. If she wanted to talk, she'd have to start. Finally, she broke the silence. "I know I don't deserve it," she said softly, her voice raspy. "But thank you for staying last night. I thought you might not come back." Her words hit me the wrong way. I set my mug down harder than I intended, the sound breaking the fragile quiet. "I didn't stay for you," I said flatly. "I stayed because I didn't know what else to do." Amanda flinched, her fingers tightening around her mug. "Ethan," she began, her voice trembling. "I don't even know where to start. I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it all back." I finally looked at her, my chest tightening as I saw the raw emotion in her face. But it wasn't enough. Sorry didn't fix this. Sorry didn't undo the months of lies, the betrayal, the images in my head of her and Jason. "Do you?" I asked coldly. "Do you actually wish that? Because you didn't seem too sorry while you were sneaking around with Jason." Her head dropped, her shoulders sagging like the weight of her actions was finally crushing her. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "I messed up. I know I did. But I still love you, Ethan. I never stopped loving you." I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Funny way of showing it. If you loved me so much, maybe you could have just talked to me instead of running off to your ex. Her eyes snapped up to meet mine, pleading and desperate. "I was hurt," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought you didn't care anymore, that you were pulling away. I was so convinced you didn't love me, And you thought cheating would fix that?" I interrupted, my voice rising. My hands gripped the edge of the table so hard I thought the wood might crack. "You didn't even have proof, Amanda. You just decided I didn't love you, and instead of asking me about it, you went and slept with him. Do you have any idea how messed up that is?" Her tears started then, spilling silently down her cheeks. She wiped at them furiously, like she was trying to keep some shred of dignity. "I know," she choked out. "I know I ruined everything. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make it right. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Just tell me what I can do." I leaned back in my chair, staring at her. Her face was a mess of tears and regret, her hands trembling as she clutched her mug like it was the only thing anchoring her to reality. I wanted to feel something for her in that moment, pity, compassion, anything, but all I felt was cold. "I don't know, Amanda," I said finally, my voice quiet but firm. "I don't know if there's anything you can do. You broke something that doesn't just get put back together with a few therapy sessions." Her sobs grew louder, her head dropping into her hands. "Please, Ethan," she begged, her words muffled. Please don't give up on us. I love you. I'll do anything. Just, please don't walk away. I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I couldn't sit there anymore, couldn't keep looking at her and feeling this knot of anger and sadness tightening in my chest. I need some air, I muttered, grabbing my keys from the counter. Ethan, wait. She called after me, but I was already out the door. The cool morning air hit me like a slap to the face, but it didn't help clear my head. I got into my car and drove aimlessly, the weight of everything pressing down on me. I didn't know where I was going or what I was looking for: peace, clarity, something to tell me what to do next. But none of it came. All I could think about was the life Amanda and I had built together, the memories we'd shared, and how it all felt tainted now. Could I forgive her? Could I move past this? Or was this the end? The answers didn't come, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly lost. It was hours before I finally went back home. When I walked in, Amanda was still sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the empty space where I'd been. She looked up as I entered, her face full of hope and fear. I didn't say anything. I just walked past her, up the stairs, and into the guest room. For now I needed space. The rest would have to wait. The next few days passed in a blur, a strange limbo where nothing felt real but everything was too raw to ignore. Amanda tried, over and over, to talk to me, to find a way to break through the wall I'd built between us. Every attempt felt hollow, and honestly, I wasn't ready to hear her out. How could I? Every time I looked at her, all I could see was Jason. Them together. Her lies. Her betrayal. I stayed in the guest room and avoided her as much as possible. Meals were eaten in silence, and conversations, if they happened at all, were short and cold. I felt like a ghost in my own house, haunting the ruins of what was supposed to be our life together. On the third night after the confrontation, Amanda knocked softly on the door of the guest room. I ignored her at first, but she didn't go away. "Ethan, please," she said through the door. Just let me talk to you. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." I didn't answer, debating whether to let her in or not. But something in her voice sounded desperate, almost broken. With a sigh, I got up and opened the door. She looked terrible. Her hair was unkempt, her face pale and tear-streaked, and there were dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept since the night everything came out. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. She hesitated, biting her lip. "I just want to talk," she said quietly. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word, letting her enter. She sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. For a moment, she didn't say anything, like she was trying to find the right words. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked up at me. "I know I've already said this, but I'm so sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "I know that probably doesn't mean much right now, but I need you to know how much I regret everything I've done." "Regret doesn't fix anything," I said, crossing my arms. "You think saying you're sorry is enough to undo what you did? You betrayed me, Amanda. You destroyed everything we built together." "I know," she said quickly, her voice breaking. "I know I did, and I hate myself for it. I hate that I let my insecurities and my stupid, impulsive choices ruin the best thing in my life. But Ethan, I need you to believe me when I say I still love you. I never stopped loving you." I laughed bitterly. "Love? Don't talk to me about love. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have gone behind my back with Jason, of all people. And for what? Because you thought I was cheating? That's the excuse you're clinging to?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "It's not an excuse," she said softly. "It's the truth. I convinced myself you were pulling away, that there was someone else. And instead of talking to you, I let that fear control me. I know it's my fault, and I know I hurt you more than I can ever make up for. But Ethan, I want to try. I want to fix this." I shook my head, the anger bubbling up again. "You don't get to fix this, Amanda. You don't just hit the reset button and pretend everything's fine. Do you even understand what you've done to me? To us? I can't even look at you without feeling sick. Her tears spilled over, and she wiped them away with trembling hands. I do understand, she whispered. And I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. I don't even know if you'll ever be able to forgive me. But I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. Counseling, therapy, transparency, whatever you need. I'll fight for us, Ethan. Even if you don't believe in us anymore, I'll keep fighting. Her words hung in the air, heavy and desperate. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that she was sincere, that she was truly sorry and willing to do the work. But part of me couldn't shake the thought that it was too little, too late. I don't know if I can do this, I said finally, my voice cracking. You broke something that can't just be put back together. And honestly, I don't know if I want to try. Amanda let out a quiet sob, her shoulders shaking. Please, Ethan, she begged. Please don't give up on us. I'll do anything. Just give me a chance to prove that I'm serious. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I turned away, running a hand through my hair as I tried to calm the storm raging inside me. I need time, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I need time to figure out if there's anything left to save. She nodded, her face crumpling with grief. Take as much time as you need, she said softly. I'll wait. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't give up on me yet. She left the room a few moments later, closing the door quietly behind her. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. The silence in the room was deafening, and for the first time since the confrontation, I let myself cry. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if our marriage could be saved or if it was already too far gone. But I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't ready to give her an answer. Not yet. Ethan spent the next few days in a haze. He went through the motions, work, errands, coming home to the same cold, tense atmosphere that had settled over the house. Amanda was trying, that much was clear. She would leave little notes on the counter saying things like, I hope your day is okay. Or, dinner's in the fridge if you're hungry. But every gesture felt hollow. Ethan avoided her whenever possible, retreating to the guest room at night and avoiding eye contact during the few times they were in the same room. It wasn't that he wanted to punish her. He just didn't know how to be around her anymore. On the fifth night, Amanda approached him again after dinner. She stood in the doorway of the guest room, her body tense, like she was bracing for rejection. Ethan, she said quietly. Can I come in? He hesitated but nodded. She walked in and perched on the edge of the bed, keeping her distance. I've been thinking a lot, she began, wringing her hands. About everything. And I want to tell you everything. I want to answer any questions you have, no matter how hard they are. I don't want there to be any more secrets between us. Ethan crossed his arms, leaning back against the headboard. You think spilling every detail is going to fix this? He asked, his voice sharp. No, she said quickly. I know it won't fix anything. But I also know you deserve the truth. All of it. Even if it hurts. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Her eyes were filled with fear but also determination. Part of him wanted to kick her out of the room, to shut the door and leave her with her guilt. But another part of him, a part he wasn't proud of, wanted to hear her out. He wanted to understand why she'd done what she did, even if it didn't make a difference. Fine, he said finally. Start talking. Amanda took a shaky breath. It started a few months ago, after I got the promotion. Jason reached out to congratulate me, and we started texting. At first, it was harmless, just catching up, talking about work. But then it turned into something more. What do you mean by more? Ethan asked, his jaw tightening. She hesitated, her hands twisting in her lap. We started flirting. I told myself it was innocent, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I felt so disconnected from you, Ethan. You were working late all the time, and when you were home, it felt like you were a million miles away. And Jason, he made me feel seen. Ethan's stomach churned, but he forced himself to stay calm. So what happened next? Amanda's voice broke as she continued. We met for lunch a few times. Nothing physical happened at first, I swear. But then one night. She trailed off, tears spilling down her cheeks. One night what? Ethan pressed, his voice cold. I slept with him, she said finally, her words barely audible. It only happened a few times. I ended it weeks ago, Ethan. I realized what I was doing and how much I was risking. I told him it was over. Ethan's hands clenched into fists, his entire body tense. Do you even understand what you've done? He asked, his voice shaking. Do you know what it's like to find out that the person you love, the person you've built a life with, has betrayed you like this? Amanda's tears came harder now, her whole body trembling. I know I hurt you, she sobbed. And I hate myself for it. I hate that I let my insecurities and my fears push me into doing something so horrible. But I need you to know that I never stopped loving you. I was stupid, and selfish, and weak, but I never stopped loving you. Ethan shook his head, his heart heavy. Love isn't supposed to feel like this, he said quietly. Love isn't supposed to rip you apart. Amanda reached for him, but he pulled away, standing up and putting distance between them. I can't do this right now, he said, his voice strained. I need space. I need time to figure out if there's even anything left to save. She nodded, her face crumpling with grief. Take all the time you need, she whispered. I'll wait. I'll do whatever it takes. Just don't give up on us yet. Ethan didn't respond. He left the room, closing the door behind him as Amanda's sobs echoed softly in the background. That night, as he lay awake in the guest room once again, Ethan felt more lost than ever. The days dragged on, blending into each other in a haze of confusion and pain. Ethan went to work, but his focus was non-existent. His coworkers noticed his distraction, but he brushed off their concerns with vague excuses about stress. At home, the silence between him and Amanda had become the new normal. She tried to reach out, offering to cook dinner, asking if he wanted to sit and talk, but Ethan always found a way to shut her down without saying much at all. He wasn't ready to forgive her. He wasn't even sure if he wanted to. On the 7th night after the confrontation, Amanda surprised him by knocking softly on the door of the guest room again. Ethan tensed. He debated ignoring her, but her voice came through, quiet but insistent. Ethan, I need to say something, she said. And I think you need to hear it, whether or not you want to. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine, he said, his tone flat. She opened the door and stepped inside cautiously, like she was walking on broken glass. She held a folder in her hands, gripping it tightly as she sat down on the chair in the corner. What's that? Ethan asked, eyeing the folder. It's everything, Amanda said, her voice trembling. My phone records, emails, texts, everything from the last few months. I went through it all and printed out everything you might want to see. I thought it might help you. I don't know, understand things better. Ethan stared at her, unsure if he was more surprised or angry. You think reading your texts with Jason is going to help me? You think I want to see that? Amanda looked down, her hands tightening on the folder. I don't know what you want, Ethan, she said softly. I just know that you deserve to have all the facts. No more secrets. No more lies. He hesitated, then reached out and took the folder from her. It felt heavier than it should have, the weight of her betrayal contained within its pages. He didn't open it right away. Why now? He asked, his voice quieter. Why give me this now? Because I've been thinking a lot about what you said, Amanda replied. About how I should have come to you instead of running to him. And you're right. I should have trusted you. I should have trusted us. But I didn't, and I ruined everything. Her voice cracked, and she took a shaky breath before continuing. I don't want to make excuses anymore. I just want to be honest. And if this helps you understand why I did what I did, or if it just helps you decide what to do next, then it's worth it. Ethan nodded slowly, though his chest tightened at her words. He set the folder down on the bedside table and looked back at her. "If I read this," he said, "it's not going to make me forget what you did." "I know," Amanda said quickly. "I'm not asking you to forget. Or even forgive. I don't want there to be any more questions between us." He didn't respond. After a long pause, Amanda stood and walked toward the door. "Take your time," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll be downstairs if you want to talk." Ethan waited until the door clicked shut behind her before picking up the folder again. His hands shook slightly as he opened it, flipping through the pages. There were call logs and text transcripts, emails between her and Jason, even a printed record of her GPS locations on the nights she told him she was working late. As he read, the timeline of her affair became painfully clear. He saw the messages where Jason had flirted with her, testing the waters, and Amanda had hesitated before responding in kind. He saw the texts arranging their lunches, the late-night calls when he'd been asleep upstairs, the excuses she'd given Jason when she finally ended things. It was all there, in black and white. Ethan's heart felt like it was being ripped out of his chest all over again. Each message was a knife, each lie a reminder of just how much Amanda had hurt him. But amidst the pain, there was something else, an odd, bitter clarity. For the first time, he understood the full scope of what had happened. There were no more shadows, no more guesses. Just the brutal, unvarnished truth. By the time he finished reading, it was nearly midnight. The house was silent, and the folder sat on the table like a damning verdict. Ethan stared at it for a long time, his mind racing. Part of him wanted to march downstairs, throw the folder at Amanda, and demand she leave. Another part of him felt exhausted. Like he'd finally reached the edge of his anger and found only emptiness on the other side. He didn't know what to do yet. But at least now, he knew everything. Ethan barely slept that night. The contents of the folder played on a loop in his mind, each message and timestamp etching itself into his memory. By morning he felt drained, like the weight of knowing everything had sapped whatever energy he had left. When he finally came downstairs, Amanda was in the kitchen, standing at the sink with her back to him. She didn't turn around, but he could tell she knew he was there by the way her shoulders stiffened. "I read it," he said, his voice flat. Amanda turned slowly, her face pale but composed. "And?" she asked cautiously. Ethan leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. "And now I know every detail," he said. "Every lie, every excuse, every time you looked me in the eye and told me something that wasn't true. Congratulations. You've given me a perfect record of your betrayal." Amanda winced at his words, her hands gripping the edge of the counter for support. "I didn't do it to hurt you more," she said softly. "I did it because I thought you deserved to know everything. Even if it made you hate me more." "I don't hate you," Ethan said bitterly. "I wish I did. It would make all of this a hell of a lot easier." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. "Not this time. I'll keep saying I'm sorry until I can't anymore," she said. "And I'll keep fighting for us, even if you don't think there's anything left to fight for." Ethan exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "You keep saying you want to fight for us, Amanda, but you were the one who destroyed us in the first place. How do you think that's supposed to work?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice cracking. "But I know I want to try. I know I love you. And I know I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove that to you." He looked at her for a long moment, his chest tightening. Part of him wanted to believe her, to cling to the hope that they could somehow rebuild what they'd lost. But another part of him, the part that had spent the past few nights reliving every lie and betrayal, wasn't sure if he could. "I need more time," he said finally, his voice quiet. "I'm not ready to make any decisions yet." Amanda nodded, wiping at her eyes. "I understand," she said. "Take as much time as you need. I'll wait." Ethan left the kitchen without another word, heading out the door and into the crisp morning air. He didn't have a destination in mind, but he needed to get away from the house, from Amanda, from the suffocating weight of everything. He ended up at a park, the same one where he and Amanda used to take walks on lazy Sunday afternoons. He sat on a bench, staring at the empty playground and the leaves rustling in the breeze. For the first time in days, he let his guard down, allowing himself to feel the full weight of his emotions. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but so was the sadness. The grief for what they'd had, for the life they'd built together. He thought about their wedding day, the way Amanda had smiled at him like he was her entire world. He thought about the late nights spent talking about their future, about the family they wanted to build. And now, here he was, sitting alone on a park bench, wondering if any of it had ever been real. Ethan didn't know how long he sat there, lost in his thoughts. When he finally got up, the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the park. He walked back to his car, his mind still racing, and drove home. Amanda was waiting for him in the living room when he walked in. She stood as he entered, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "Did you think about anything?" she asked, her voice hesitant. "I think about it all the time," Ethan replied. "Every second of every day. And I'm still no closer to an answer." She nodded, biting her lip. "I know this isn't something that can be fixed overnight," she said. "But I'm not giving up on us, Ethan. Not until you tell me it's over." Ethan didn't respond. He walked past her, up the stairs, and into the guest room. As he closed the door behind him, he realized he wasn't just trying to avoid Amanda. He was trying to avoid the part of himself that still wanted to fight for her. And that, more than anything, terrified him. The days stretched into weeks, and though life around Ethan continued as usual, it felt like he was stuck in place, unable to move forward. He went to work, returned home, and spent most of his evenings in the guest room. Amanda tried to bridge the gap. She asked if he wanted to have dinner, suggested they take a walk, even offered to sit down and discuss their next steps. But Ethan kept her at arm's length. One night, after a particularly restless day, Ethan found himself pacing in the guest room. The folder Amanda had given him still sat on the desk, untouched since that first brutal read-through. He kept glancing at it, his mind a jumble of questions. Why had she kept talking to Jason for so long? Why hadn't she just come to him the moment she started feeling disconnected? Why did she let it go so far? The door creaked open, and Amanda peeked inside. She looked hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. Ethan stopped pacing and sat on the edge of the bed. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice tired but not harsh. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "I know you're sick of hearing me say sorry," she began. "And I know I can't undo what I've done. But I need you to understand. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you." Ethan ran a hand over his face, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Then why did you do it, Amanda? Why didn't you just talk to me?" "I was scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I thought you didn't care anymore. I thought if I told you how I felt, it wouldn't matter." "That's crap, and you know it," Ethan shot back. "You didn't even give me the chance. You just assumed the worst and acted on it." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You're right. I didn't give you a chance. I let my fear and insecurity control me, and I made the worst decision of my life. But I can't go back and change it. All I can do is try to be better, to prove to you that I'm still the woman you fell in love with." Ethan sighed, his anger deflating into exhaustion. "I don't even know if I believe that woman still exists," he said quietly. Amanda flinched but didn't argue. Instead, she walked over and sat down in the chair by the desk. "I know it's hard to believe," she said softly. "But I'm still her, Ethan. And I still love you." He didn't respond. He couldn't. The weight of her words pressed against the ache in his chest, but he wasn't sure if it was enough. They sat in silence for a while, the tension between them thick but not as sharp as it had been. For the first time in weeks, Ethan didn't feel the urge to leave the room or tell her to leave. Instead, he just sat there, letting the quiet fill the space between them. After a while, Amanda stood up. "I'll let you get some rest," she said, her voice low. "But if you ever want to talk, really talk, I'll be here. Whenever you're ready." Ethan nodded but didn't look at her as she left the room. That night, for the first time in weeks, Ethan didn't stare at the ceiling, overwhelmed by anger or sadness. Instead, he lay in bed, his mind quieter than it had been in a long time. He still didn't know what the future held. But for the first time, he allowed himself to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, Amanda was telling the truth. The following weekend, Ethan decided to take a drive. The walls of the house felt too close, too stifling, and he needed space to think. Amanda didn't ask where he was going, though her worried expression made it clear she wanted to. Instead, she simply said, "Be safe," as he walked out the door. Ethan drove aimlessly for hours, past neighborhoods, parks, and places that used to mean something. He passed the coffee shop where he and Amanda had shared their first date, a dimly lit booth in the corner where they talked and laughed for hours. He passed the movie theater where they used to go every Friday, the smell of popcorn always making Amanda smile. Now, those places felt hollow. Like the memories they held belonged to someone else. Eventually, he found himself pulling into the parking lot of a small diner just off the highway. It was the kind of place he used to stop at during long work trips, the coffee cheap but reliable. He slid into a booth by the window, ordered a black coffee, and stared out at the passing cars. He thought about everything Amanda had said over the past few weeks. Her apologies, her promises, her insistence that she still loved him. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that the woman he'd fallen in love with was still there, buried beneath the mistakes and betrayal. But he couldn't ignore the part of him that screamed to walk away. That part reminded him of every lie, every moment Amanda had chosen Jason over him. The waitress brought his coffee, and he nodded a quiet thank you. He took a sip, the bitterness matching his mood. He pulled out his phone, scrolling mindlessly through his emails and messages until he landed on one he hadn't opened yet. It was from a therapist Amanda had suggested, a couples counselor she thought might help them work through everything. Ethan had ignored it at first, unwilling to even consider the idea. But now, staring at the email, he hesitated. The subject line read, "Healing starts here." Ethan opened it, scanning the information. The email laid out what to expect from counseling, emphasizing the importance of communication, honesty, and effort from both parties. He leaned back in the booth, his fingers tightening around his phone. Could counseling actually help? Could it bridge the enormous gap between them? Or would it just drag them through more pain without leading anywhere? Ethan closed the email and shoved his phone back into his pocket. He wasn't ready to decide. Not yet. When he finally returned home, the house was quiet. Amanda was in the living room, curled up on the couch with a book. She looked up when he entered, her face lighting with cautious hope. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey," he replied, shrugging off his jacket. "Did you have a good drive?" "It was fine," he said. He hesitated for a moment, then added, "I stopped at the diner by the highway." Amanda nodded, her expression neutral, though he could tell she wanted to ask more. Instead, she simply said, "I'm glad you got some air." Ethan lingered in the doorway, watching her. For the first time in weeks, she didn't try to push him into a conversation or apologize for the 100th time. She just sat there, giving him space to come to her on his own terms. "I saw the email from the counselor," he said suddenly. Amanda's head snapped up, her eyes wide. "Oh," she said. "I wasn't sure if you... I mean, I didn't want to pressure you." "I didn't delete it," he interrupted. A flicker of hope crossed her face, but she quickly masked it. "Okay," she said carefully. "That's good. Whenever you're ready to talk about it, I'm here." Ethan nodded, then turned and walked upstairs to the guest room. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank wall in front of him. For the first time, the idea of trying didn't feel impossible. It still felt painful, daunting, and uncertain, but it didn't feel impossible. And that, Ethan thought, was something. The next day, Ethan woke up with a sense of resolve, not clarity exactly, but something close. He still wasn't sure if he could forgive Amanda or if their marriage could survive, but he realized that staying in limbo wasn't sustainable. He needed to take a step, even if it was just a small one. After breakfast, Ethan found Amanda sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee cradled in her hands. She looked up as he entered, her expression guarded, as though she was afraid to hope. "I want to talk," Ethan said, pulling out the chair across from her. Amanda's eyes widened slightly, and she nodded quickly, setting her coffee down. "Of course. I'm listening." He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "I read the email from the counselor. I've been thinking about it, and I think we should try. I'm not saying it's going to fix anything, but maybe it'll help us figure out what comes next." For a moment, Amanda just stared at him, as though she hadn't expected him to agree. Then her shoulders sagged with relief, and she nodded. "Okay," she said softly. "I think that's a good idea. Thank you for even considering it." "Don't thank me," Ethan said, his voice firm. "I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it to figure out if there's even a chance for us. This doesn't mean I've forgiven you." "I know," Amanda said, her voice trembling slightly. "I know I have to earn your forgiveness, and I don't expect it to happen overnight. I'm glad you're willing to try." Ethan nodded, his chest tight. He still wasn't sure if this was the right move, but at least it was a move. Sitting in silence, letting the anger and sadness fester, wasn't helping anyone. Later that afternoon, Amanda made the call to the counselor. Ethan listened from the living room as she spoke, her voice quiet and serious. She scheduled the first session for the following Tuesday, and when she hung up, she came into the room and sat down on the edge of the couch. "It's set," she said. "Tuesday at 6. Does that work for you?" "Yeah," Ethan said, not looking up from the TV. "That works." Amanda hesitated, like she wanted to say more, but instead she nodded and left the room. Ethan stared at the screen, though he wasn't really watching. The thought of counseling made him nervous. He wasn't the type to open up about his feelings, especially not to a stranger. But if there was even a small chance it could help, he owed it to himself to try. Tuesday came faster than Ethan expected. The hours at work crawled by, the weight of the appointment looming over him like a storm cloud. By the time he got home, Amanda was already dressed and waiting by the door. She looked nervous, fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "Are you ready?" she asked as he walked in. "Let's get this over with," Ethan muttered, grabbing his keys. The drive to the counselor's office was tense. Neither of them spoke, the silence filled with unspoken fears and questions. When they arrived, Amanda led the way into the small, cozy office. The walls were painted a soothing shade of blue, and a few abstract paintings hung on the walls. The counselor, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, greeted them warmly and gestured for them to sit. "I'm Dr. Harper," she said, settling into her chair. "It's nice to meet you both. I know coming here probably wasn't easy, so I want to start by saying I appreciate your willingness to be here." Ethan nodded stiffly, while Amanda offered a weak smile. Dr. Harper folded her hands in her lap. "Why don't we start with the basics? Ethan, Amanda, why are you here today?" Ethan glanced at Amanda, who looked at him expectantly. He sighed and leaned forward. "We're here because my wife had an affair," he said bluntly. "And I'm trying to figure out if there's anything left worth saving." Amanda flinched at his words but didn't interrupt. Dr. Harper nodded, her expression calm. "Thank you for being honest, Ethan. That's a good place to start. Amanda, how do you feel about what Ethan just said?" "I feel ashamed," Amanda said quietly. "I know I hurt him, and I know I betrayed his trust. I hate what I did, and I hate that I made him doubt everything we've built together. But I also know I want to fix this. I want to earn his trust back, if that's even possible." Dr. Harper nodded again. Earning trust back is a long process, and it's not something that happens overnight. "Ethan, how do you feel about what Amanda just said?" Ethan hesitated, his jaw tightening. "I don't know," he admitted. "I want to believe her. I really do. But every time I look at her, all I can think about is what she did. It's like this cloud hanging over everything. That's a valid feeling, Dr. Harper said. And it's important to acknowledge that healing takes time. You're allowed to feel angry, hurt, or conflicted. Those emotions are a natural part of the process. Ethan nodded slowly, though the knot in his chest didn't loosen. The rest of the session was a blur of questions and careful, measured responses. Dr. Harper guided the conversation, asking them to talk about their communication, their fears, and their hopes for the future. By the end, Ethan felt emotionally drained but also slightly lighter. As they walked back to the car, Amanda glanced at him nervously. "How do you feel?" she asked. Ethan shrugged. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. But for the first time, he didn't feel completely stuck. The ride home from the counseling session was quiet, but it didn't carry the same suffocating tension as before. Ethan stared out the window, his thoughts churning as the city lights blurred past. Amanda kept her eyes on the road, sneaking glances at him every so often, though she didn't say anything. When they pulled into the driveway, Ethan unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out of the car. Amanda hesitated for a moment before following him inside. Once they were in the house, she turned to him. "Thank you for going," she said softly. Ethan nodded but didn't respond. He wasn't ready to talk about the session yet, not with her, anyway. Instead, he went upstairs to the guest room, shutting the door behind him. Sitting on the bed, he let out a long breath. Counseling hadn't magically fixed anything, he hadn't expected it to, but it had stirred something inside him. For the first time in weeks, he felt like he had a glimpse of clarity, even if it was faint. Dr. Harper's words echoed in his mind. Healing takes time, and trust isn't rebuilt overnight. It's okay to feel conflicted, but progress starts with honesty. Ethan wasn't sure if he could trust Amanda again, but he realized he owed it to himself to try, if not for the marriage, then for his own peace of mind. Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Amanda attended counseling regularly. The sessions were emotionally draining, often forcing them to confront uncomfortable truths about their relationship. Dr. Harper didn't let either of them dodge responsibility. She asked Amanda to dig deeper into the choices that had led to the affair, while also challenging Ethan to express his emotions instead of bottling them up. One session, in particular, hit harder than the rest. Dr. Harper leaned forward, her gaze steady. "Ethan, I want to ask you something. What is the hardest part about moving forward from this betrayal?" Ethan hesitated, his jaw tightening. "It's everything," he said finally. "It's the lies, the betrayal, the fact that she didn't even talk to me before running to him. How am I supposed to trust her again when she didn't trust me enough to come to me in the first place?" Amanda flinched but didn't interrupt. Dr. Harper nodded. "Those feelings are valid. Betrayal often leaves us questioning the foundation of the relationship. Amanda, what would you like to say to Ethan in response to that?" Amanda took a deep breath, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "Ethan, I don't expect you to trust me again overnight. I know I broke something sacred between us, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it. But I want you to know that it wasn't about not trusting you. It was about me, being scared. Scared that you didn't love me anymore, scared that I wasn't enough for you. I let my own fears and insecurities cloud everything else." Ethan frowned, her words sinking in. He didn't respond, but something about the way she spoke felt real. At home, the small shifts began. Ethan started eating dinner with Amanda again, though their conversations were still guarded. They no longer avoided each other in the hallways or pretended the other didn't exist. It was tentative, like walking across thin ice, but it was progress. One evening, Amanda brought up something unexpected. "I was thinking about what Dr. Harper said," she began as they sat at the dinner table. "About rebuilding trust. And I want to take a step forward. I want to be completely transparent with you." Ethan looked up from his plate, his brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means giving you access to everything," Amanda said. "My phone, my emails, my social media accounts. No more secrets. If there's anything you want to see, it's yours. He stared at her, caught off guard. Why now? Because I want you to know I have nothing to hide, she said earnestly. I want you to feel secure, even if it takes years. Whatever it takes, Ethan. He hesitated. Part of him wanted to take her up on the offer, to comb through her messages and emails and make sure there were no lingering lies. But another part of him, a quieter, more uncertain part, wondered if constantly monitoring her would only make things worse. I'll think about it, he said finally. Amanda nodded, her expression understanding. That's all I can ask. The days continued to pass, and with each one, Ethan felt the slightest bit less weighed down. It wasn't that the pain had disappeared. It was still there, sharp and raw, but the edges had started to soften. He wasn't sure if he was ready to forgive Amanda, but he was beginning to see her efforts for what they were, sincere. One night, as they sat in the living room watching a movie, Amanda broke the comfortable silence. Do you remember when we used to come home from work and do this every Friday? She asked, her voice tinged with nostalgia. Ethan nodded. Yeah. We'd argue over which movie to watch, and you'd always fall asleep halfway through anyway. Amanda smiled faintly. I miss that. I miss us. Ethan didn't respond right away, his gaze fixed on the screen. Finally, he said, I miss us too. But I don't know if we can ever be the same. Amanda's smile faded, but she nodded. I know. But maybe we don't have to be the same. Maybe we can figure out something new. Ethan considered her words, his chest tight. He wasn't sure if he was ready to hope again, but for the first time, the idea didn't feel impossible. The weeks rolled on, each one marked by small, hesitant steps forward. The counseling sessions continued, and while Ethan still felt the sting of betrayal every time Amanda's affair crossed his mind, he began to notice subtle changes. The Amanda sitting across from him in therapy, or next to him on the couch, seemed different. She wasn't defensive anymore. She didn't try to rationalize what she'd done or deflect blame. She listened, really listened, when he spoke about the hurt she'd caused. One evening, after another emotionally charged session with Dr. Harper, Ethan found himself lingering in the living room instead of retreating to the guest room. Amanda sat on the other end of the couch, a blanket draped over her legs, scrolling aimlessly on her phone. Do you ever feel like we're just going through the motions? Ethan asked suddenly, his voice breaking the quiet. Amanda looked up, startled by the question. Sometimes, she admitted. But I think that's part of the process. We're trying to figure out what normal looks like now. It's not easy. He nodded, leaning back against the cushions. I keep wondering if I'm fooling myself. If I'm wasting time trying to fix something that's too broken to save. Amanda's face fell, but she didn't look away. You're not wasting time, she said softly. Even if this doesn't work, I think it's worth trying. You're worth trying for, Ethan. He studied her, searching for any sign of insincerity, but found none. The Amanda sitting before him was raw, vulnerable, and completely open. It was a stark contrast to the guarded, distant person she'd been during the affair. Do you ever think about him? Ethan asked abruptly. Amanda's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't flinch. No, she said firmly. Not anymore. When I ended things with Jason, I meant it. He doesn't mean anything to me now, and he never did compared to you. I know that's hard to believe, and I don't blame you if you don't. I don't know if I believe you, Ethan admitted, his voice heavy. But I want to. Amanda's shoulders sagged, her relief evident. That's a start, she said. The turning point came a few days later. It was a Saturday morning, and Ethan was cleaning out the garage while Amanda worked in the garden. As he moved boxes and sorted through old tools, he came across a dusty photo album tucked away on a shelf. He opened it, and was immediately greeted by a picture of their wedding day. Amanda stood next to him in her white dress, her face lit with joy, her hand resting lightly on his chest. Ethan stared at the photo, a pang of sadness and longing coursing through him. Flipping through the album, he found photos of their first apartment, their honeymoon, and holidays spent with friends and family. Each picture told a story, a snapshot of the life they built together. For the first time in weeks, Ethan didn't feel anger or bitterness. He felt a deep, aching sadness for what they'd lost, and a faint hope that maybe, just maybe, they could build something new. Carrying the album into the house, he found Amanda in the kitchen, washing dirt off her hands. She looked up, surprised to see him. "What's that?" she asked, nodding toward the album. "Thought you'd like to look at this," Ethan said, setting it on the counter. Amanda dried her hands and opened the album. Her breath hitched when she saw the first photo. "I haven't looked at this in years," she said softly, flipping through the pages. They sat together at the counter, quietly reminiscing as they turned the pages. For the first time in what felt like forever, the silence between them wasn't heavy or strained. It was comfortable. As Amanda lingered on a photo of them at a Christmas party, Ethan said, "Do you think we could ever have that again?" Amanda turned to him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "I don't know," she said honestly. "But I'd do anything to try." Ethan nodded, his chest tightening. He still didn't know if forgiveness was possible, but he realized something important. He wanted to find out. That evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, Amanda shifted closer to him. It was a small gesture, but Ethan didn't pull away. When her hand brushed against his, he hesitated for a moment before lacing his fingers with hers. Amanda looked up at him, her eyes filled with surprise and hope. He didn't say anything, but the small squeeze of her hand said enough. It wasn't a resolution, not yet. But it was a step, a small, tentative step towards something new. The next few weeks brought more small changes, the kind that seemed insignificant on the surface but meant everything to Ethan. Dinner together became a routine again, no longer punctuated by awkward silences or one-word answers. He found himself spending more time in the living room, watching TV with Amanda instead of retreating to the guest room. It wasn't easy, though. Every step forward felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. Some days, the memories of her betrayal hit Ethan like a freight train, leaving him angry and distant. Other days, he felt almost normal, like the wounds were starting to scab over, even if they hadn't fully healed. One night, after their latest counseling session, Ethan and Amanda sat in the car outside their house. The session had been particularly emotional, delving into the root causes of their breakdown. Ethan had spoken about his feelings of neglect during Amanda's affair, while Amanda had admitted that her actions stemmed from fears she hadn't known how to handle. "I feel like I'm finally starting to understand why I did what I did," Amanda said quietly, breaking the silence in the car. Ethan gripped the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the house in front of them. "Understanding why doesn't make it hurt less," he said, his voice tight. "I know," Amanda said, her voice trembling. "But I'm hoping it can help us move forward. Even if it's just a little." Ethan didn't respond right away. He let her words hang in the air, their weight settling over him. Finally, he sighed and turned off the ignition. "Let's go inside," he said, his tone soft but weary. Inside, Ethan poured himself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. Amanda joined him, sitting across from him as she always did. "I've been thinking about something," she said, her voice tentative. Ethan looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "What?" "I think it might be time for us to do something together," she said. "Outside of the house, I mean. Something that's just ours." Ethan frowned slightly. "Like what?" "I don't know," Amanda admitted. "Maybe dinner at that Italian place we used to go to? Or a walk by the lake? Something small, just to remind us of us." Ethan leaned back in his chair, considering her suggestion. The thought of going out together, of trying to rebuild some kind of connection, felt daunting. But it also felt possible. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's try dinner. Saturday night." Amanda's face lit up with surprise and cautious hope. "Really?" "Yeah," Ethan said, nodding. "But don't expect miracles, Amanda. This doesn't mean everything's fixed." "I don't expect miracles," she said quickly. "I just want a chance to show you that I'm serious about rebuilding this." Saturday night came faster than Ethan expected. He felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread as he got ready, putting on a button-down shirt he hadn't worn in months. When he came downstairs, Amanda was waiting in the living room. She wore a simple black dress, her makeup understated but elegant. "You look nice," Ethan said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Amanda smiled, a flicker of warmth in her eyes. "So do you." The drive to the restaurant was quiet but not uncomfortable. When they arrived, they were seated at a small table by the window, the soft glow of candlelight casting a warm ambience. It felt strangely nostalgic, like a glimpse of their life before everything fell apart. As they looked over the menu, Amanda glanced at him nervously. "Thank you for doing this," she said. "I figured it was worth a shot," Ethan replied. Dinner passed in a blur of tentative conversation. They talked about work, mutual friends, even a few light-hearted memories from their early days of dating. For a moment, it almost felt like the cracks in their relationship weren't so deep, like they could still find something worth holding onto. But as they walked back to the car, the weight of reality returned. Ethan couldn't stop the images from flooding his mind, the texts, the lunches, the nights she'd spent with Jason. "Ethan?" Amanda's voice broke through his thoughts as they reached the car. He turned to her, his face somber. "I'm trying," he said quietly. "I really am. But it's hard. Every time I think we're making progress, I get reminded of everything." Amanda nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know it's hard. And I know I can't undo what I've done. But I promise you, Ethan, I'm here. For the long haul. For however long it takes." Ethan stared at her for a long moment, his heart heavy. "I hope that's true," he said finally. Back at home, Ethan lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Dinner had been a step forward, but it hadn't erased the pain or the doubts. Forgiveness still felt far away, but for the first time, it didn't feel impossible. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a way to rebuild. The weeks after their dinner out were a cautious balancing act. There were moments of progress, shared laughter, lingering conversations over coffee, the return of small, familiar gestures. But there were also setbacks. Ethan's anger and sadness would flare up unexpectedly, and Amanda would retreat, unsure of how to comfort him without making things worse. One night, Ethan sat alone in the guest room, staring at his phone. He had scrolled through countless forums and articles about infidelity and recovery, but none of them seemed to offer the clarity he was looking for. Every story, every piece of advice seemed to boil down to the same maddening truth: there were no guarantees. The door creaked open, and Amanda stepped inside, her expression tentative. "Can I sit with you?" she asked softly. Ethan hesitated but nodded. She sat down on the edge of the bed, folding her hands in her lap. "I know I've said this 100 times, but I want you to know how proud I am of you," Amanda said. "For even trying. I know it hasn't been easy, and I know I don't deserve it, but it means everything to me." Ethan exhaled slowly, his shoulders slumping. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm just wasting my time," he admitted. "If I'm fooling myself into thinking we can ever be okay again." Amanda's face fell, but she nodded. "I understand why you'd feel that way. But I don't think it's a waste of time, Ethan. Even if we don't end up where we used to be, I think trying matters. It shows that what we had was worth fighting for." Ethan studied her, searching her face for any sign of insincerity. But all he saw was vulnerability, raw and unfiltered. "What if I can't forgive you?" he asked quietly. "What if I never get past this?" Amanda's voice trembled as she replied. "Then I'll accept that. As much as I want to fix this, I know I can't force you to forgive me. All I can do is try to show you that I'm still here, that I'm still the woman who loves you." Ethan looked away, his jaw tightening. "It doesn't feel like that sometimes. It feels like I'm holding on to a memory of you, not the real you." Amanda's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. "Then let me show you who I am now," she said. "I can't change the past, Ethan. But I can spend every day moving forward, proving to you that I'm still worth fighting for." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. For the first time, Ethan felt the tiniest flicker of something he hadn't felt in months: hope. In the days that followed, Ethan found himself loosening the walls he'd built around his heart. They weren't gone, not entirely, but he allowed Amanda closer, bit by bit. He accepted her offer of complete transparency, though he quickly realized he didn't feel the need to check her phone or emails. The gesture itself seemed to matter more than the access. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Amanda pulled out a small notebook. "What's that?" Ethan asked. "I've been keeping a journal," Amanda said, her voice soft. "Writing down my thoughts, things I've learned in counseling, and things I'm grateful for." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Grateful for?" Amanda nodded. "Like the fact that you're still here. That you're still willing to talk to me, even when it's hard. That we're even having this conversation right now." She hesitated, then handed him the notebook. "I want you to read it. Not now if you're not ready. But when you are. It's yours." Ethan took the notebook, his chest tight. "Why?" he asked. "Because I want you to see how much this means to me," Amanda said. "How much you mean to me. I know words aren't enough, but I hope it helps." Ethan stared at the notebook for a long moment before setting it on the coffee table. "Thanks," he said gruffly. Later that night, after Amanda had gone to bed, Ethan picked up the notebook. Flipping through the pages, he found heartfelt entries about her counseling sessions, reflections on their marriage, and deeply personal notes about her own growth and regrets. One entry caught his eye. "Ethan, if you're reading this, I want you to know that I see the pain I've caused you. I see it every day, and it breaks my heart. I can't take back what I did, but I promise you, with everything I have, that I'll never stop trying to make it right. Whether or not we make it through this together, I will never stop loving you." Ethan closed the notebook, his throat tight. He wasn't ready to forgive her, not fully. But for the first time, he felt like forgiveness might be possible. He didn't know what the future held, but as he climbed into bed that night, he allowed himself a small, tentative thought: maybe they could find a way forward. Together.